in charge of Grassi Franchise Services. Today we're going to address two very important topics, not necessarily in this order. First is HR and how the new tax laws affect the employer-employee, and then second is cybersecurity. Please, throughout the presentation, if you have questions, send us an email and let us know. We'll stop the presentation to answer them. If you suffer from CRS, you would want to do that. Well, can't remember sugar. You don't know what CRS means. You want to get those questions out to us. It is an interactive forum, so please let us know. Does anybody have a preference on going first? Nope. So here to discuss cybersecurity is Tom Pyre. He's part of Grassi. Grassi actually has a cybersecurity division. Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself and take it away.
My name is Tom Pyre. I am Network Security Supervisor for the firm. I handle all of the information security, so that goes beyond just the digital for Grassi, as well as a consultation and advisory service for our clients. I handle all tools, all training programs, as well as implement and input into policies, processes, and procedures that go along and really govern that kind of world.
Excellent.
So, cyber for the franchise. What we're going to do is we want to make sure a couple things whenever you're looking at a franchise or even for your own personal. A lot what we're going to cover, because the franchise world is so similar to personal individuals, a lot of this can actually be applied to your own life, your own personal email, the way you handle your own accounts. So we'll talk about that. And it all works through knowing your risks. You can't protect yourself unless you know what your risk is. We'll discuss the prevention mitigation strategies, what we want to do to undergo those, as well as any underlying technologies to support them. When it comes to information security, a key point to remember is that technology is strictly a tool you use to meet the needs you've established. So you should never just believe technology alone. Security is not served by tech alone. And all the steps and considerations. A key takeaway to always remember is that regardless of who you are in an organization, information security has a role for all people. So what does every organization need regardless of size? First and foremost is buy-in from ownership, leadership, so whether that's occurring at a large boardroom level organization, or that's just a small ownership group, or even an individual owner. The ship is steered based on where you point it. It needs to come from leadership. And the best way to do that is by establishing strong documented policies and procedures that allows you to have guidelines, allows you to have a way to go. The documentation of the policies and procedures is actually something that we can assist you with. We're going to get to some resources at the end of the slide for you to get examples and some input, but we can always help you as far as establishing where you want to go in those. You should also be able to establish everyone's role, where they know that they're looking to go, and that it's not IT. Very, very often, the presumption is whoever handles the IT for my organization is also handling my security. IT is basically flipping switches, and I can speak that without speaking ill of my brethren, because that's where I was born. I came out of the IT department. We do not set policy in IT. We do not decide what is and what isn't. All we're allowed to do is set the switches and implement the controls that come from leadership. So you want to make sure that's going through. The second part, you want to make sure going forward, a key component, have a strong business continuity, disaster recovery, and incident response. And that can vary depending on the size of your organization. It can be as simple as a good backup process and procedure. And remember, backup is nothing if not tested, and if you can't recover files from the backup. You're also going to set your backup policy based on data loss. How long can you be without this data before your business basically goes under? As we talk about the rest of these items that you want to go through, you have to remember that prevention is going to fail. We can set up all the roadblocks in the world that we want. Eventually, they will fail. So what do you do secondary to either create a defense in depth perspective or how to be able to respond to those? And as you ask yourself questions around your organization, remember that security is nothing more than risk assessment. This is actually InfoSec axiom that we go by. It should never interfere with the day-to-day operations, only secure it. And once you've established what your risk assessment is, you as an ownership is going to establish how much of that risk you're okay with. So these are all the points to consider as the points of risk. I've highlighted through the double asterisks key points that are going to be more common, more of an issue for a franchise organization or an individual. Phishing is a big, big one in an email. That's really where you want to make sure you're training and educating your staff around phishing programs. One of the recommended processes is to actually phish your own people. Again, we can help you establish that or work through how those are supposed to work.
Do you have best practices? I know I get thousands of emails from different clients, different people asking for things. It's very difficult to figure out which one's legit versus not.
So there's a couple of quick ways to tell, which is what we go over in our training programs. You need to review who is it coming from. And by that, I don't just mean the name that shows up, but if it does show the email address, give that a read. Because more often than not, the name will not correspond to the email address. Don't trust and verify. We're going to get to that actually later, but don't believe anything is coming from anyone. If you're not expecting the email and or the information, presume it's not legitimate. If you're ever unsure, verify through secondary means. You never want to reply to the email you find questionable and asking the sender, hey, did you mean to send me this? Because if the account has been compromised, I have seen many an instance where the malicious actor will actually reply back saying, no, it's good. Please feel free to click the link.
And is the fear not so much opening the email, more of the fear of clicking a link, as opposed to, like, I guess, where's the greater part of the fear?
The greater risk involves around clicking the link or opening the attachment. There are some very, very highly advanced campaigns that simply opening the email could be an issue, but that's really nation-state actors. That's really only if you're a high-level government official in the military you're going to see those. The vast majority of us don't have to worry about opening. We really just need to be more concerned about clicking the links or the attachments involved. Third party is any organization that you work with or connect to. We all remember the Target breach. The Target was not breached. The company that provided their HVAC services, that was the company that was compromised. And since they had a connection into Target, they were able to go through one system and then gain access to the Target system. So you really have to have strong contracts that the third parties that you're dealing with know what's going on and that they're taking proper policies and steps to mitigate. USB drives. You need to know what's going on with the USB ports and determine a level of trust for a USB drive. You can very easily turn off a USB drive if you've determined you're never going to use them. Big factor for home and any office, the default settings on any and all hardware and software. I know what the default password is for QuickBooks out of the box because I can Google the owner's manual. I know the same thing for your Linksys router at home. I know the same thing for the Cisco routers you're going to find in many enterprises because they're standard defaults that come. The very first thing you should do when you put in a new piece of hardware, firmware, and or software, either disable those accounts or immediately go in and change the name and the password. That goes too for baby monitors and your home video cameras that you use for security. That's why those were so easily compromised about a year ago and took over most of the East Coast. Authentication, a lot of us like to use cloud accounts. Office 365, it's a great rollout. You don't have to worry about putting all the servers and stuff inside one of your offices, maintaining it. Microsoft offers a great feature from Office 365. But anything you're going to access in the cloud, you need to have multi-factor authentication. That's really the greatest part of risk. Most of us have poor password management skills, and we'll get into some things to help alleviate that later on. But a second factor allows me, even if someone can guess my username and password, they still need to have that second factor, whether it's acknowledging an app on a phone, some places use a USB key that everybody has to have, and the last part of risk is your people. People are the first and last part of defense. They are the best and worst part of security within a system. That's why a good educated user base really helps enhance. We refer to it, you'll see it referred to as the human firewall. People are the best part. So where are the risks? We spoke about phishing and email. 93% of the compromises you're going to read about start as a phishing attack, whether that's ransomware, whether that's someone stealing your login credentials with a fake login page, whether that's installing a remote access system, so keylogger. Almost all those incidents start with phishing. So by having strong email policy, by having staff well educated to what to be aware of, you can really get a good jump on protecting your environment and have a strong prevention. You're going to need to know how each one operates and how they operate differently, and what your most likely areas for attack and by whom. So junior level staff, I may not worry about so much, but I'm really going to go after the people who have power. That's your owners, that's your controllers, anyone who has access to the data and or is going to have access to the money. Remember, this is no longer the time of I'm going to get into an organization and just show what I did. It's very similar to breaking into a bank. Breaking into the vault doesn't do me anything. I need to get out with the money. I need to find a way to exfiltrate the information I'm trying to steal from you. Franchises are going to get caught up by some of the more common scams, such as W-2. Someone, either from individually or internally, will send an email requesting payment information or employee payrolls, saying they need to verify. That leads directly to IRS and tax scams. So you need to really be conscious of what you're likely to be asked, who should have access to that information. You also need to have policy. If someone makes a request for a money transfer or to cut a check through an email, there should be a secondary channel to confirm that payment. Even if it's as simple as just walking over and asking person to person, doesn't need to be super formal, as long as the policy itself is formalized.
The biggest question we receive from clients is whether or not the IRS will call you asking for money. The IRS will never call you. They will actually send you a letter first, second, and third. Then after those 3 failed attempts, you may get an agent, but they will not call you coming to visit you. So if you get a phone call from someone saying they're the IRS or you're going to be arrested or they're going to send someone down, odds are it's a scam.
To that point, we also see similar emails. The IRS will not email you. And later on, we have references to the IRS's sites and warnings, as well as where to report. I received about 6 phone calls from the quote-unquote IRS telling me I'm about to be arrested if I don't call them back immediately. The secondary notice also, be aware that criminals are also aware of some of these tips and tricks we give you. If you do receive a letter and you really do not believe that the letter is legitimate, do not call the 800 number at the bottom of the letter. Go to the IRS's website and call the number there to confirm the information, because it's very simple to recreate letterhead, make something look official. Letterhead, seals, they're all over. They're very easy to replicate.
And or send it to your account. We'll help you with that as well.
You can't protect what you don't know. So where you're going to start is you need to have an awareness of your environment. What do I have that they're going to want? Do you accept credit card payments, hold and store those credit card information? That's an area I'm going to want to go against. You also have to make sure you're maintaining your PCI DSS compliance issues, specific security around access. Those are all areas that we can help you from an advisement consultation perspective, but you need to know where those are. I can't protect what I don't know, and I can't advise where I don't see where the information is. Best practices is a good way to start. There's some information that can be found that we can share at a later date. They're kind of word heavy, but if you're interested in implementing some of the top 20 security controls, we can certainly help you understand how those apply to your organization. Take baby bites. Everyone starts going through the risk and they realize, oh my God, everything is horrible and my data is exposed all over the place. Every journey starts with the first step. Take the broadest, largest risk you have and work in general. Some people call it an insider threat. I always refer to it as internal. The vast majority of times an issue happens inside an organization. It was not intentional. A staff member made an honest mistake. They were fooled by the phishing email. They sent an email to John Doe instead of John Smith, and it happens to have all of John Smith's records in it. There's no intent to steal. There was no intent to defraud. It was an honest mistake. Again, policy, procedure, and education and training. If you have a POS area that's easily accessible, those are highly, highly dangerous. It takes 2 to 3 seconds to be able to put a POS scanner on top of a machine. All you need to do is one distracted clerk, and it's very simple to do.
Do we have time? I have a great story. We have a client that's in charge of the anti-terrorist network in the FBI for the MTA. And he was telling us of a scam similar to what you were saying. They actually took the face of an ATM machine, just put it right in front on top of an existing ATM machine. So every time anyone swiped to go to the train or the bus terminals, they got all the credit card information identically. and no one had a clue for months that this was even on. It looked identical. They just put it right on top, so it looks exact. I was amazed when you showed me pictures of the stuff.
They are very quick to put in front of a system, and they are very hard to notice. And how many times have any of us, I've seen them put on gas stations where you pay at the pump. They pop them on there. I've seen them on countertops. It takes 2 or 3 seconds to pop them on there. ATM, my mother had her account compromised because they hit our bank ATM, which is kind of embarrassing considering who her son is.
It's ingenious what they can do.
It's very, very quick, and it's actually not a lot of money to do. We already talked about the W-2 scans and supply chain remote access. That's just same idea. If you allow people to use Microsoft Remote Desktop or Citrix Terminal Server, or you have a VPN access back home into your network if it's not cloud-based, you also want to have that second dual-factor authentication applied to that as well. Again, the thing to remember when you're looking about, it's not so much do I trust Mary, it's Mary's account's access. So Mary may never do anything wrong, but if Mary's account has too much access and I compromise that, that's what I'm using. So it's really not about the individual, it's about the account access. Changing default accounts. But the policies have to be there. Policies are nothing without teeth. So if you tell people they're not allowed to use their name and a password, and there is no way of enforcing that, you don't block that in the system, you don't conduct random checks, they mean nothing. This is really where your HR policies come into effect. HR is going to work hand in hand to help make sure whatever you craft as a policy doesn't violate any sort of human resources guidelines. It's also going to make sure that things are handled properly with staff. So again, security is going to work. You wear many hats when you're working with security. It's not just strictly technical. Franchises are very unique in that when you're trying to implement policies, you may expect the franchisor to help. There's actually protocol and precedent that advise them to not. So if the franchisor tells you certain policies that you need to follow, or they work to implement too many items, and you become suspect or are breached and compromised, the franchisor itself is actually liable. The other part that makes it unique is many of us are not aware of the individual owners of specific franchises. So recent months, there was a breach in about 120 different POS systems at Applebee's restaurants. It happens to be isolated to one very specific franchisee owner who happened to own multiple locations. But I don't know which locations those are. Now, none of them were in New York, where I happen to live, but plenty of my friends said they weren't going to go to any of the Applebee's until it was resolved. So strictly by sharing a name and having the same franchise or parent company, that's why it's a brotherhood in competition, but you also need to be aware that you also could affect each other's business simply because the ownership doesn't really get checked by the main consumer. Do you share data? Sharing data creates a mutual dependency between you, so you do want to make sure you're meeting up with the franchisors, but also not going back to the franchisee. And that becomes a cyber insurance risk. If your policies are stronger, your cyber insurance would be related to your businesses, not necessarily what the franchisor is going to dictate, because their best method is to be general about it to remove a level of liability. So let's start with the basics. Strong passwords. The first part of a strong password is stop thinking of password and think of passphrase. Multiple phrases. A lot of places are going to say we want to have complex passwords. That's that fun part where you have to do uppercase, lowercase, number, and some kind of symbol. Length in a password is actually better than complexity. It is harder to crack a 30-character password that's nothing but words than it is a 12-character password that has all of that mismatch within it. The best way to do this actually is a password manager. A lot of these are free and can be used. LastPass is one that I use personally. I have a couple others available as options at the end of the slide. It'll create random passwords for you, keep track of them. You don't even need to know your own passwords. So I only know about 3 passwords. The passphrase to my vault in LastPass is 37 characters long.
Sorry. I think I would have taken a nap like midway trying to type that.
But it's a passage from a book. It's not random characters, it's not random words, it is an entire sentence. Microsoft Windows, the latest versions, actually will allow the space bar as a character in the password. So if you can think of a sentence to type, the space is actually allowed. So keep them relatively personal to you. The same rules still apply. Don't use family names, pet names, anything someone can guess. But length trumps complexity. You should have at a minimum 15 characters in a passphrase, at an absolute minimum. For an organization, you want to have that passphrase changed every 90 days, and you want to disallow the reuse of the last 6 passwords. The big issue, personally, professionally, that we all have is we reuse the same password across all of our accounts. It makes it simpler, and that's really where a password manager helps you with that. If I crack your one password, not only do I have access to your work email, I have your personal email, I probably have your Facebook page, your social media accounts, and I also probably have your bank. And once I have all of those, all bets are off. Any account you have that has web access, your bank, your social media, they should allow for a dual factor or multi-factor option. You should enable that, whether it's with SMS, a second application, or other.
No, so that password keeper you were mentioning, that is an app that's I guess can come with you. It's not something on the PC that you would have to leave.
So many of them function the same way. The one I use is called LastPass. LastPass is an app on your phone. It also stores the data in the cloud, and it has what are called add-ins for websites. So when I log into Chrome, there's an add-in for LastPass. I log into my password manager account in Chrome, and now all my passwords are accessible. So if I have to log into my bank, there'll be a button for me to click, and the password manager autofills my username and password for me.
Interesting.
So I don't need to remember anything. As long as I have my phone, my passwords are with me wherever I want, but as long as I can log in, so it really allows things to go through. The nice thing about it, too, is you can store other information in there. You want to have a nice, complex password for your Wi-Fi in your office, but where do you write it down? It actually has a subsection for that it calls sites, which is basically any kind of information like that. So my personal and my family's public Wi-Fi that we have, I have it saved there. So I don't have to memorize it, but I don't have it written down anywhere. It's quick and easy access. Key component, InfoSec is not cyber only. It's data and data repositories. So that's where we want to make sure that you know where it is. Leaving information out on a public area or anything else, that's dangerous. If you have credit card information at the front desk, if someone walks in to ask a question that they know is going to require you to get up and check in the back, it only takes me 2 seconds to snap a photo of the credit card statements or customer information on my phone when you turn your back. So even leaving hard copies around, again, that's why we're not talking about technology or anything else. The key thing to come back on here is the third to last point and the final point. The trust but verify. You really want to don't trust and verify. My father is a very, very smart man. If he ever sends me an attachment that's anything than a Word document, there is no way it came from him. So if he sends me a PowerPoint, unless I built the PowerPoint for him, I am never going to see it as an email attachment. So I don't trust, and then I verify that it was coming from him. Credit cards and debit cards. This actually runs both ways. As a consumer, you want to use a credit card. Why? Credit cards are easier to stop payment on. They're easier to fight the charges. A debit card is automatic. Once the money's gone, it's gone, if you don't catch it at the immediate point. As a business owner, you would much rather be able to accept a debit card because the money's in your account right away. There is no waiting for the credit card processing or any of the other information. So that's that separation. When it comes to credit card security, you want to have one credit card for yourself that you use for all online purchases and nothing else, and you want to turn on alerts for card not present and other transactions. So if that card ever gets swiped or used elsewhere, you're going to be aware of it. It's much easier to control it if you isolate that card to one area. But once you start adding all these protections, the multi-factor, the educational training, a strong risk assessment, you've really taken a large step into eliminating a lot of these risks. The W-2 and wire transfer scams go away because you're verifying by a second means, and that's just a phone call. We haven't bought or purchased any technology to put in place. We've just established a process to make sure information is accurate. Phishing attacks are no longer effective because you have an educated staff who know what to look for and what not to click on. These all go through. If you have a strong reputation, your cyber insurance can actually be less because you can show that you have certain controls in place, which makes you far lower of a risk. Once you've done the basics, which are the most important, now you can really go back and revisit it. So you took care of that top level of your area of risk. Start segregation of duties. The person who writes the checks shouldn't be the person who determines who a new vendor is, and or have additional controls so that all payments are authorized and seconded by a controlling party. Admin accounts should be separate and isolated. Most of us know that you can be what's called an admin on your local computer, which is basically referred to as God mode. There is nothing you can't do. Have a separate account. Don't use your personal account as that account. Make them have to go elsewhere to get that. Going forward, you should really look into investing into a 24/7 monitoring response. We can help you with this actually as well. But that basically means that someone is monitoring for abnormal or malicious activity in your network environment on your systems 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and can respond at the immediate notice. Many breach notifications require you to be aware of what happens and report immediately. Most organizations are not aware that they've been hit for at least 6 months. So to have that constant monitoring really goes a long way. Double check all of your supply chain contracts, make sure that they have proper procedure and process in place in the language of their contract to protect the information that you share with them. Once you have the information, it does not matter who processes it. If I ask you for your credit card information and my third party is the cause of the breach, I am partially responsible. That's the way the law looks at it. You should do annual pen testing, at least annual.
And meaning?
Penetration testing is you hire someone to try to hack you, and then he tells you how he did it, as opposed to somebody who's never going to tell you how he did it, but he will do it anyway.
You tell the truth. You want to do that, don't you?
I can, and I purposely don't, because you can get in a lot of trouble. There's a very formal way of going through it, but we can get through those later. So we talked about how professional and personal overall. So how are they similar? What steps can you take for both? Social media awareness. Know what you're sharing online. Know who has access to see what those accounts are. There's a quick story about a couple that wanted to share the fact that they got engaged, so they took a photo of them sitting on their couch and her showing off the wedding ring, and they sent it out on Facebook. And they got congratulations on your engagement and on your baby, which surprised the couple greatly because they never mentioned the baby. They hadn't told anyone that they found out they were pregnant. What they failed to realize was, in the background of the photo, was the positive pregnancy test that she had taken earlier, clearly visible in the photograph they had posted online. So you kind of need to know what you're doing. Again, one account, one passphrase each. So that's unique passphrases. Choose multi-factor whenever you can. Monitor your credit reports. Many credit card companies allow for you to opt into a quarterly credit report. You know, American Express does. You're allowed to choose to have your credit report, but you also need to check it. If you're really concerned about identity theft, you may want to consider a credit freeze. The rules vary from state to state on whether or not you have to pay for it. A credit freeze means no one can run a check against your credit without your authorization because you've completely frozen that option. So if you do a credit freeze and then go for a car loan, they will not be able to even check because you have frozen your credit. What that means is no one can actually open a false account in your name, but there is some payoff where you may be inconvenienced a little bit here or there. When you back up your data, don't store your data back up where you have the original data. It did work. Company told me they needed to help restore from their backups because they had a massive flood. I asked them, where's your offsite data? And they picked up a soaking wet backup hard drive from the floor of the main office because they just kept swapping out drives. So just certain items like that. Open public networks. Starbucks is great. If you're going to work in a Starbucks, as soon as you connect to the Wi-Fi, go on the VPN. It is very easy for me to steal your information inside a Starbucks. You'll never notice it's happening.
You have to tell the Starbucks. We have time. Tell the Starbucks. So I'll never drink a cup of coffee the same way again.
So there's a new threat. You talk about when the crypto jacking, or the way I would steal it?
The way you would steal it that other people may or may not have thought of.
So for $250 in total hardware, I'm going to buy a system called a Pineapple that allows me to create a Wi-Fi called Starbucks, just like you're going to see. And I'm going to make my signal stronger than the Starbucks signal in the store. So when your computer connects to the open Starbucks network, you're actually connecting to me. That's connected to the rest of the stuff I bought from Radio Shack. All free, none of it purchased illegally, because there's legitimate penetration testing uses for these. And everything you do on your computer through the web is going to filter through me. Every email, every web search, every web page you visit, it's all going to go through my account. Every password and username you transmit to log into an account is going to come through me.
Moral of the story, don't piss off Tom. He'll get you.
True phrases. Only use trusted and needed apps. If you're no longer in Hershey Park, uninstall the Hershey Park app. That's basically what we're looking for here. Again, it's about small steps. It's not about technology. It's about securing information. The first slide we have here is these are just some general government resources. The FTC, who can enforce for anything regardless of the regulation. They have some advisement for small business. The identitytheft.gov site is if you believe you have been a victim of identity theft, that's where you go to begin the process of reporting. It has links to the IRS. The IRS has general government warnings about identity theft, fraud scams, reporting them. The IC3, that's for any kind of breach or hack you as an individual or as a company may have become. That's how you begin reporting it through to the FBI. Also, again, franchise services can help you walk through these steps to make sure you don't do them out of order, possibly compounding the issue. And then, again, as mentioned earlier, these are just some of the top lines. LastPass is the one I use. The others are alternate options. I don't want to speak for a company, make it sound like authenticators. Those are both dual factor authentications. Duo is a great little one. If you have 10 users or less in your organization, it actually winds up being free. That's just the multi-factor part. You can slap it on in front of anything. CSO Online, those are websites for news. These are less technical. That's why I included them here. You can really understand them just if you have a general understanding of the world. You do not need an IT background. The two podcasts, again, for the same reason, they are not overly technical. They can be enjoyed by any old person who wants to just hear what's happening lately in the news. Have I Been Pwned? This is a great site you should use for yourself and your organization. Have I Been Pwned is free. It tracks known breaches and data dumps and updates in real time. You go to Have I Been Pwned, you put in your email address, and it will tell you if it has ever shown up on a data dump. Wow. There's also a menu option for password. You can actually type in your password. It will not show in the field that actually blocks out, and it compares the hash of your password, so not even the actual password goes through, to known passwords that have been dumped. So even if it's necessarily yours, if it's all too common, it'll let you know that people are aware of this password, and then you can make stronger choices as far as which password you should use. And as always, Grassi Franchise Services is a resource that you can use and utilize to help you understand best methods, best practice, or review any and all of these steps.
Wow. Tom, thank you. I'm going to go home and check some of those sites out. As always, Tom does have a lot of great insight. Any questions you have, please send us an email. There are additional services that Tom can provide. If you're interested in those services, let us know. I don't know if we have any questions. This is a lot more fun if we ask questions, folks.
So the first question is, can we get a copy of the presentation?
And the answer is yes. The conclusion of this webinar, we'll send out later today, if not today, tomorrow, a link for you to actually get a copy of the presentation that you can log in at your own free will. Excellent. And if you do have questions throughout the presentation, please send them in even for Tom. We can always circle back if we have time. Next on the list, we're going to discuss some HR topics that relate to the new laws. Presenting the topic today is Jeff Aganoff. Jeff, take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, James. It's a pleasure to speak electronically with everybody today. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is obviously something that's been rolled out over the last several months. There's been some kind of confusion, obviously, and of course how it affects, tax laws, and obviously a lot of it ties into the world of human resources and your people, your employees, which obviously is one of your largest assets inside your organization. Give you a little background on myself. I head up our HR and operational consulting practice. I work with a lot of companies and organizations like yours, small middle market companies, in doing outsourced HR and all the different elements inside what a company needs from an HR perspective, whether it's performance management, benefits, recruiting, all the fun stuff, that you would need to do with your employees. So today we're going to give a presentation regarding some of the changes on how HR changes have affected from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, then talk about a few hot topics that are out there in kind of the HR and employee world. And like James said, we want to be able to answer any questions as you go along the way. Please chime in, and let's try to make this as interactive as possible as we can over the web. Okay, so to start off on key facts on the Affordable Care Act, the ACA, which is a buzzword obviously a lot of us have been dealing with over the last couple of years. Sometimes when you see information in the news, it doesn't give you the full story. I know there's been a lot of information that the Affordable Care Act has ended or will end shortly, obviously with our new president. That's not entirely factual. There have been some changes to the Affordable Care Act that have been added recently and will probably continue to change over the next year or two. The main one that people talk about a lot is the elimination of the individual mandate. So later this year, it will not be required that an individual will have to have mandatory insurance under the Affordable Care Act. There's a lot of people that are very happy about that, and obviously some that are concerned. For you as the employer, it has, again, some pros and cons. As you'll see in bold two, employees, they still must offer coverage if you meet the FTE stand for full-time equivalent headcount threshold, which, so that does not change. So again, there's thresholds from a federal and a state standpoint that you need to make sure that you meet, and any employee that wants to take your coverage must do that. Just as an aside for people that are not familiar with that FTE headcount, that is not necessarily the amount of employees you have, but the percentage of employees that make up what are full-time equivalents. And again, that's something we could always help you calculate if you have a lot of part-time or flex-time employees. From a tax standpoint, you still need to prepare 1094, 1095 forms. You have been given a few extra weeks of an extension to file them every year, for the next few years into April, which will help some of us out a little bit. One of the takeaways from the changes in the Affordable Care Act is by eliminating the individual mandate that some of your, we'll call lower risk employees might no longer take your medical insurance, which when you get priced in your overall plan, depending on the size of your organization, employee headcount, could, impact you as an employer by having higher rates. The less healthier people that are in your plan and higher risk people that are on it, oftentimes will correlate to a higher rate that you as an employer will pay, whether that's you contributing, most of that, or even passing on some of those higher costs to your employees. So that is unfortunately one of the negative effects of some of these changes. So we still would ask you, and you should try to encourage some of your healthy or lower risk people to be on the plan, even though they're not mandated anymore by the ACA. This is an evolving area that everyone needs to stay on top of, and again, we are very on top of, and we'll continue to communicate information to you and to work with you on changes that come across with the Affordable Care Act. Okay. One pretty significant change that came is a paid leave credit for the employers, which mostly has a lot of benefits, not only for the employers, but for the employees. What this new act is trying to do is give employees that will qualify under what is a typical Family Medical Leave Act the ability to get paid for a period of time during that leave, and to give employers an incentive to continue to pay those employees. Oftentimes, smaller organizations had no paid leave because of the cost, and obviously they weren't necessarily receiving any tax credit for it. So this mostly, again, is a positive for both sides. So basically, effective immediately, employees can claim a general business credit equal to the wages paid to that qualified employee. Obviously, there's some caveats to it. First off, the employers need to give a paid leave of at least 2 weeks and compensate their employee at a minimum of 50% of what their regular earnings are. Again, a few other caveats. That employee must make under $72,000 annually. So if they're paid over that, then you would not qualify for that credit. The credits range from a minimum of 12.5% up to 25%. And, you know, that will go up in an increment of 0.25 for every $1,000 above the 50%. So that's how it's calculated. Again, we can help you calculate for that as well. This is going to be for 2018. So just to kind of clarify that for everyone as well. So, you know, not necessarily a benefit for 17, but as a go forward, you know, for 2018.
Which is a great thing to start tracking. They can send to your accountant. Little tidbit for myself. So at the end of the year, when I was scrounging for this information, you know, potentially 10, 12 months later, if you have that information currently, save it, send it to us after the fact, and we can control it for 18.
Absolutely. So again, some of you might already have, you know, paid leave policy. So this could be updated or augmented based on this new tax deduction. Those that don't have one or want to consider one, again, this is an incentive to potentially do that as well. Again, a few more items that must be met. The employee must be employed for at least a year, and you do need to offer this to part-time employees to be eligible for the credit. So if you have, let's say, 10 full-time employees and you want to give it to them and 5 part-time employees, you have to offer it to them as well on a prorated basis.
So what parts are mandated versus voluntary?
In terms of the characteristics, it is all mandated. So
we're doing this out of the goodness of our heart, not so much. We're doing this because we have a moral obligation.
No, you don't have a moral obligation. So again, none of this is mandatory. I know there was, again, some things that were coming out a year ago that the president was going to have a mandatory paid leave. Particularly, he mentioned maternity leave for up to 6 weeks. That was not passed through. So all this is voluntary. It's just an incentive. If it's something you wanted to do, now you're going to be able to get a tax credit for it. So it has those positives. So again, the employer is not obligated to have any leave payment program. But again, from a competitive standpoint, employee retention, morale, all those things, it is something to really highly consider, and it is becoming more common even in smaller and middle market companies. Absolutely. Okay. But again, it's pretty straightforward with the paid leave credit, but we are here to help you with any questions that you have or the implementation of such program. Okay. So again, in any change, there's some positive and negative. There's some nice changes in terms of what we'll term employee perks that came up from the Act. But again, some things that, you know, maybe are not ideal for the employer and the employee. Another item that was discussed a lot was a tax deduction for reimbursable meals and travel and things of that nature. There were some tweaks to that. Mostly positive news, that employers can get a 50% tax deduction for providing on-site eating or meals delivered or the such. The definition of that is not completely clarified, to be honest with you. And we're, you know, really it's being followed up with how that, you know, Act was written. But pretty much if you're providing an on-site meal, you're getting meals delivered, or you're doing it as a perk for your employees, you can take that 50% tax deduction. There was a client that recently mentioned that they get, you know, they sell certain meals like fresh and fit meals, and they wanted to provide that to the employees. That will be something that you can get that 50% deduction on.
The old law was what percent?
Well, it varied. So, you know, but this is what the new law is going to be.
Right.
So it's going to be the 50% deduction. To kind of tie to that, there is, again, meals and entertainment provisions. That has been repealed. So that's where it gets a little confusing. So if you're having, let's say, a session where you're providing a meal, it was a social gathering, is the, you know, you have a holiday party or something of that like, that is no longer tax deductible unless you provide an educational experience, is kind of how it's termed. So if you ever went through that holiday party and have like a 1-hour training session, there you go. And we're kind of mocking that a little bit, but there are some clients that are considering that they're doing a social event and tying in some kind of education or training. Then that will be deductible if you could show that tie to those two events. So it's something, again, to think about, but pure parties, social gatherings, those are not. It has to be something that's business or, you know, work related, being on site, or training related. Even if those of you who might take some clients out, if you take a client out, let's say to a sporting event, that used to be deductible, buying the tickets, the meals, that's no longer provided. What we saw actually a couple of clients do recently is they're renting a suite at an arena. I had a client that took people to a basketball game, asked us if they could do like a 1-hour presentation in the suite before the game. Would that be deductible? The answer is yes, it is. So
there are ways around it.
Yes.
We do have a lot of clients that treat their employees very well to activities. When they do those activities, these are some ideas to be mindful of.
Yes.
Especially for 2018.
Absolutely. If any of you have people that are relocating, to work for your entity, moving from location to location, there are some changes in employee moving expenses that are no longer deductible, and even the payment to the employee is no longer tax-free. So if they were going to put in for reimbursement, let's say for a few $1,000 for the moving company supplies, they can no longer get that payment tax-free. So that is a somewhat significant change. Those of you that have on-site gyms, which can be some of you, there is no longer a deduction for that as well. So that's unfortunately, again, a little bit of a difficult change. For those that are involved with having mass transportation or parking benefits, those will no longer be deductible to you, but they are tax exempt to the employees. So they at least get that, that positive change out of that. Achievement awards, actually a very interesting topic, that there's been some changes that are, again, positive and negative. I know a lot of us want to reward our employees, like James alluded to before, treat employees well, give them incentives. A lot of our clients, a lot of times have given out gift cards or even cash to people as kind of a one-time incentive, and ultimately, those are not items that can be deductible. So there are a couple changes that you need to be mindful of. So a couple of them is, one, you're allowed to give an incentive now up to $1,600 per gift, which is actually up from the $400 it used to be. But the caveat to that is you're no longer, the average of it can't be more than $400. So for example, let's say you have a reward that's based on years of service inside your company. A 1-year person gets $100. A 25-year person can get up to $1,600. But it can't average more than $400 for it to be deductible. You also can't do it based on their salary. So you can't say the employee who makes $100,000 gets this gift, and the one who makes $50,000 gets this gift. It has to be something that's non-discriminatory in terms of salary. Okay. The other item is the best practice to giving out an achievement award is either have a set gift, whether that's, again, you're here for 5 years, you get this gift, 10 years, you get this gift, or order through a catalog or some type of website that gives them an allotment of dollars to be able to purchase something through that catalog website, a set amount. It can't just be, again, random gift cards, cash, which I know is a little bit easier, but that will not be tax deductible. And that's been very specified in these changes in the new act. Okay.
So Jeff, some of our clients do sell some sort of garment apparel.
Okay.
So they actually give discounts for those garment apparel to be purchased by employees. That's something they can do as far as potential gifts.
Yes, they could do that as well. It's a set gift that is not just cash, gift card. As long as it's something that's a set gift, that's really how it's being defined. That they can definitely do that.
So I'm not saying anything out of season that they want to sell at a discount. They can clear the shelves. Maybe a good dual strategy.
Absolutely. That is a great dual strategy.
Excellent.
Okay. So is there a question?
There is a question. Okay. So the first question is, can we limit the paid leave to employees with a certain job title or classification, or do we have to offer it to everyone?
You really have to offer it to everyone. Again, there's obviously always nuances around items, situations that we can work with you on. But the general theme is you have to offer to all your employees in the same site. Now, for example, if any of you have different types of businesses that are separate entities, yes, you might be able to offer it. You as a sort of one business, one company, and that separate, unassociated company, you don't necessarily have to do that. But if you're a franchise owner that owns, let's say, 5 of the same type of franchise, that they all kind of tie up into one, you really have to offer to all your employees. You can't do it based off a level or specific job.
Right. And control groups rules is what we're saying. And the clients really do know what that means. All the ACA rules have been out there.
Yes. So that's a great point. It's very similar to that.
And then the next question is, can companies deduct gym memberships for their employees?
The answer is generally no. you can't necessarily make a deduction, for them having a gym membership. Again, there's other strategies around offering it as a perk, as a part of their package, but not necessarily you just paying directly for it and being tax deductible. Okay, let's continue on, and then obviously we'd love to answer some more questions. So then there are a couple key changes, I'll call it / hot topics, that are not only related to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, but even what's going on out in the environment right now. Just in case you're not aware, there is a new W-4 form that's been published for 2018. So any new employees that you hire in this year, please make sure that you use that new W-4 form. It really wasn't, heavily announced, and I want to make sure that people understand that.
Can I just jump in real quickly? So I've had some instances with our clients currently where the employees are fighting the W-4 forms of withholding of the new payroll tables.
Okay.
They, for some reason, don't feel it's enough.
Okay.
What they're wishing to do is have certain amounts preset to withhold.
Okay.
Which is kind of a technical
Yes.
situation. If that does occur, you would want to get something in writing letting the employer know that the employee wants certain amounts withheld against the payroll tables. It will protect you.
Yes, that's a great point.
Just a quick tack on, we have seen the new W-4 form used as a key in an phishing scam.
Oh, jeez.
Tell me something, Tom.
I'm still here.
Hey, they watch the news just as much as everybody else. Any opportunity.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, great point, Tom.
That is an excellent point.
Yes. Okay, and it ties into the withholding amounts. You as an employer need to make sure that you're checking all the tax withholding amounts for employees to make sure you're using the updated withholdings. That's something, again, that we've seen some clients not necessarily focus on yet. All of these Tax Cuts and Jobs Act policies, a lot that we've discussed, need to be updated and presented in some manner to your employees. The easiest way, obviously, to do that is typically an update in the manual, policies that are published and or shared with all of your employees. Some states have some new laws, including a couple that are significant, that are related to some of the changes that have been made even federally. It's important to confirm all new state changes from a payroll and employee perspective to make sure that you're in line with the policies of your state. Again, not related to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, but as we've seen in the news over the last several months, sexual and other employee harassment is a very, very hot topic. And it's not dying down. I know some people think it is. It's very, very important, to focus on that, to make sure that you're investigating any type of harassment, whether sexual or employee-related harassment. As we talked about before in other areas, make sure it's documented, do a formal investigation. That's something you can potentially do on your own, but obviously in a major situation, conferring with either your legal counsel if you have, and that is something that we here, at Grassi, help a lot of our clients with, of handling that investigation and documentation process. Another area that's coming up very significantly are equal pay initiatives, and it does tie into some of the sexual harassment that's coming out there in women's and other gender rights, and even all types of rights these days. Very hot topic that I think you're going to see become even more prevalent later in the year. And that's something that you really need to be mindful of. And we'll talk about it in the next page, a couple of items that you can focus on related to that and some of the other hot topics. Tom did a good job scaring you of IT. I'm very scared. I'm going to go home. I'm going to, lock all my computers tonight. So, I don't want to scare you the same way from a people and HR perspective, but there are some key areas that you need to be focused on related to what we've discussed today and either other items that are going to affect you and your employees. Update your employee manual and organizational policies. With a lot of what we discussed today, very, very important to do so. If you have not updated your employee manual or don't have one, it is something in today's environment is really become essential.
Can I share a quick story?
Yes.
So there was an instance, I can't divulge the name of the client, where someone tried to set fire to the organization. They have them on video, putting chemicals into a trash bin with cloths and so forth, smoke puffing up. Person got arrested, was still able to claim unemployment because in the employee manual,
yes,
allegedly burning down your boss's brick and mortar building is not a fireable offense.
Okay.
This is a true story.
Yeah, no, it's an extreme example, but could happen. It is important, and that's one example to state what is termination for cause, what are, proper actions of your employees. These are things of why having an employee manual is important. I know a lot of you, because I've spoken to, several of the franchise clients, have a very standard manual, which is better than nothing, but it really is important to customize it. Every company is different. Taking a payroll, I know a lot of people use like payroll manuals that they get for free. Again, I'd have that over nothing, but you're much better off having a customized manual that states your policies, your procedures. That is something that can be done very easily, whether it's on your own or something that we do hundreds of employee manuals per year for clients. And something very inexpensive and will protect you not only from burning a building down, but even much more minor issues. So it's a very good investment and something that you can do on your own, again, if you have that time to do that. But number one that you really should do this year if you haven't done it. Health plan analysis is something that's very important, as we said, especially with more of the healthier people kind of coming off of your medical plans, making sure that you understand your costs to you as an employer, to what your employees are, making sure it ties to what the industry standards are right now, making sure you're offering medical, dental, and other plans that are appropriate for your employees, that are competitive for the landscape that you're in right now. Payroll audit, something again that should be done probably in a best practice at least every 2-3 years, but ideally at least once a year. That is something, again, with all the different tax changes, deductions, really should be reviewed. Sexual harassment process investigations and training. We touched upon before, having a proper process, investigating all claims and inquiries, and doing a training, minimum best practices once every 3 years to all your employees. Those are things that really should be done, especially what's going on in today's environment. You don't want to make yourself susceptible to any of those issues. Compensation study, something again, especially with equal pay legislation out there and things out in the environment, something to be done very easily, and taking the market data of your market, of your industry, and giving that information to make sure that you're paying people appropriately for their roles, and even to tie it into the equal pay. Having a good employee relations process, reporting mechanism, performance management, having your employees' performance documented at minimum of once per year is not only good for employee retention, employee improvement, but obviously to protect all of your legal interests. Having non-discriminatory actions and policies, which can tie into your employee manual, but you must have clear actions and policies. That has, again, become a major legal issue over the last couple of years.
So it's clear that we need to have these policies, but ultimately, I guess what for me is not so clear is why. So having them, what would these policies, if we have in place, help us with?
Yes. One, it makes it clear to all of your employees what the rules, regulations, and actions will be. Two, from a legal standpoint, if you need to terminate or even somebody leaves, a lot of clients don't realize when somebody leaves voluntarily, you're not necessarily out of the woods. People think, well, I didn't fire them, so they can't sue me. Yes, they can. They can leave. They can claim any of these actions, and actually, in a lot of cases, might have a better case than even when they're terminated, saying that they had to leave because of these issues and were unemployed for several months, and you could be susceptible to having even a much larger payment.
Especially in the pro-friendly employee state.
Yes, yes.
And you California folks on the phone know who I'm talking about.
Yes, California is the number one, as we know.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, but other states, and we work with clients on these claims, and we're not lawyers, but we do a lot of the research and groundwork to prepare people for these cases. There's a lot of states that are becoming employee-friendly states. So management training is something, again, I'm sure a lot of you do in terms of the job responsibilities of your managers, but training managers on how to handle employees, the issues, leading them, delegating them, something that you could very likely do inside your environment, but again, we've helped a lot of our clients with as well. And the fun part, making your company the best places to work. With sometimes all of the negative out there, with changes that are in the environment, you want to show your employees why you're best places to work, why they should stay in your organization, understand and explain the perks that they're getting. Not enough organizations do that, and it's very important to implement that kind of philosophy, sharing with them We've helped clients, create total reward statements is a great way to do that for an employee to understand all of the different compensation they're getting, not just, their hardcore compensation, the perks, the benefits, the medical, even some of the employee incentives and all of that nature, tying that in. And that creates obviously a better environment, educates that employee, and obviously helps retain them. So all of these areas in terms of next steps is something that here at Grassi and Grassi HR Solutions that we provide on a consultative basis to any of you, and obviously handling the full process if that's something that you want to do as well. We also see that a lot of people use, whether it's a general business lawyer or employment lawyers, to do a lot of this work, and why they are very capable. Most of this work, including employee manuals, which is a big one, sexual harassment policies, investigations and training, do not necessarily need to be done by a lawyer. They can be done by trained HR professionals, which a lot of times can do it more practically for you and understand you as a business owner, and of course do it at a much lower cost. So I believe we have another question or two. Okay.
So yes, Jeff does have a sexy voice. We'll skip to the next question on that. So we are running out of time. If you do have additional questions, I do apologize. We are at the hour. You always send them in. There's email addresses that are on the slides. The slides will be presented as far as a link to get to them if you want to pass them around to other individuals, including staff. This is some beneficial information that we have. We will be doing more webinars throughout the year, so if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, please let us know. We'll be happy to do a couple of these, especially on-point topics that you're looking for. Thank you again for joining today's webinar.